for PCE. Let's go ahead and have a roll call. Do we need to do that? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, when I call your jurisdiction, please state your name. San Mateo County.
Here.
San Mateo County. Atherton. Brisbane. Pauline Matham. Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Menlo Park. That's three. Millbrae.
And the song.
My term's over. Sorry, guys.
Thank you.
When I call your jurisdiction, please state your name. San Mateo County. San Mateo County.
Right.
Atherton. Brisbane. Pauline Matham. Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Menlo Park. Millbrae. Portola Valley. San Bruno.
Martin Medina.
It's great. And Supervisor Pine is not here yet. He texted me, he has an excused absence. Okay. The approval, oh, let's see. We'll have public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to provide comment on something that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Can I have an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda items, please?
So moved. Sorry.
All right, we have a motion by Medina and a second by DeGolia. Roll call vote, please.
San Mateo County. Yes. San Mateo County. Oh, yeah. Brisbane. Burlingame.
Yes.
Menlo Park.
Yes.
Millbrae.
Aye.
Portola Valley.
Yes.
San Bruno.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Fantastic. Regular agenda, chair report. I don't really have any particular report except that just to remind everyone, we're going to be doing a celebration of the electrification of Caltrain. So if your city is doing a little something and you want some help, Kirsten has been very gracious to offer to set up little bags with PCE swag. So it's a really good opportunity to remind the public that PCE is providing all the electricity and the clean energy to run the new Caltrain items. So that's just a little quick reminder, and that's really it. CEO report, Sean.
I don't have a lot today either, other than to just let you all know that we had a very, very successful staff retreat last week. We were down at Costa Noa Tuesday through Thursday, and the work part of the focus was really drawing our group together, focused on the next strategic plan. I know many of you are currently involved in that, and this was the next sort of big group discussion around the strategic questions that have been identified. We also had a very robust discussion on workplace of choice as we start to consider, as this office lease ends in September of 2026, what makes the most sense for PCE thereafter. So just engaging the staff on what that might look like, given a remote first environment, needing board space and meeting space and all of that. So that was a really productive, good conversation as well. So I do want to thank the board for the executive committee in this case for just supporting our retreat. It really is, I think, the most important activity that we do all year long. And in addition to working really hard, we also laughed a lot and had campfires and singing and a lot of musicians in our group. So just confirms the amazing team that we have. So I do want to thank you for that.
Okay. If there are no public comments on the chair or the CEO reports, I'll go ahead and move on. Anything, Ellen? Okay, great. All right. Item number 4 is recommending adoption of policy 16. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sean, who's going to give us an update on the amendments to policy.
Great. Okay, so all of these two documents, policy 16, which is a policy we've had in the books for a while. And you might recall in June, we greatly expanded it to really codify current practices and best practices around governance, in particular boards, standing committees, ad hoc committees, and such. So that happened in June. And with it, there was associated amendments to our JPA agreement that were predominantly operational and administrative to make sure that those two documents talk to each other and were in alignment. We had found some duplication and conflicts in a couple of places. So then it came back to the full board in August, and we identified a couple of more changes, in particular term limits and some other things that needed further cleanup. And our chair also had identified a few other items for cleanup in policy 16. So I'm going to just review this really quickly. It's in your packet. The 3 items that we are looking to have the executive committee perhaps recommend approval to the full board. Section 4A is a reflection of the chair and vice chair term limits. As per the discussion at the last board meeting, what it will be is changed to 2 one-year terms with the option for an additional 1 year if necessary and approved by a majority vote of the board. So that's the core of it there. In section 4F of policy 16, employment and contracting restrictions for former board members, otherwise known as a revolving door policy. This is one that Chair Colson had flagged several months ago. And so essentially what it does is it prohibits employment of former board members by PCE until after 12 months following the end of their service. And then secondly, it any contracts with former board members that may come about within that 12-month period would require a vote of the full board. So it's really just creating a good governance, arm's length situation.
And an example of a contract would be, say, for example, Pradeep Gupta was on this board and he was very instrumental in helping us set up a lot of education things. It's a lot to ask someone who's no longer an elected official to please volunteer your time to educate our people about how this all works. So we might, for example, have put a contract together for him to say, we'll pay you to organize a couple of training sessions. And I think it sort of, there's a difference between hiring someone to do a contract position like that versus also just, coming to work full time. And a lot of this full-time work is really to protect the staff. And also, because you can imagine, the situation, you hire a new CEO, there's some sort of arrangement that, and then by the way, I'm retiring off the board in 3 months myself, and I'd like Nick's job. And, yeah. So, just trying to create a little bit of a buffer there so that we don't, and that's very common, I think Rick and Ray would agree, in like more the corporate world, or how we.
I think it just cleans it up. But right now, it's never been an issue.
Yeah.
But this way we clean it up.
I would like to support this. It just makes common sense that we're being transparent, and in the event that we do have a need, that we can address it. So
Right.
This is very good.
Good. Third change in policy 16 to continue here is we also have a need to kind of clean up our procedures if we have board members that are routinely absent. And when it's 1 or 2 people, it's okay, but it in a couple cases it has turned into a routine problem, and it can result in quorum issues and also just having to bring people along as we move. So what this section says is that if there are more than 3 absences, and we should clarify to say more than 3 unexcused absences, staff will contact the board or committee member to resolve the issue and just check in with him or her. And then if it continues, then the board chair would, in this case, direct staff to send a letter to the city manager, the mayor, basically saying we need to have a designee for our board. So we've never done this. Hopefully we won't have to, but We just want to, again, we just want to have it in place in case it's necessary going forward.
Yes.
So those are the three there. Any
I'll go,
comments?
yes, I'll go first, Jeff, and then
3 absences in a year or?
Yes,
Okay. I'm not sure that's.
we can
Clear.
clarify that too,
Yeah.
annually. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Director? Yeah,
You covered mine.
you covered yours, okay, and yes, Rick. Sam.
Okay, so, I've got concerns about all three of these, let's start with the third one, so. In Atherton, our. Policy is that if there are more than 2 in a row, unexcused absences, this isn't that. Then for commissions or committees, the person is off the committee. Basically, the idea is that you just can't have people that have unexcused absence that just
Don't try.
take up a seat and don't ever show up.
Yeah.
And this is 3 absences in a year, so I guess that's okay.
Well, I guess we should clarify, it's board, like not 3 absences, boards, committees, because we all sit on a lot of committees, that could get pretty cumulative pretty quick.
And you're talking unexcused.
Unexcused, so these are just people who, and the issue is like, there's a quorum, and if we know you're not coming, we can make sure we have a quorum and not waste everyone's time. So.
So go to the first one, and I know what was said at the last meeting was that this is a good thing because then somebody can't take control of the board. I'm honestly not about that. I mean, this board, we've got 23 members on the board. I don't think anybody is taking control of the board. I don't see that as a reality in this county. So I think it's okay. I mean, we had a 3-year term limit before. I think that's okay. My question is, well, what happens if somebody doesn't want to fulfill the position? This arrangement lets you do 1 more year. Well, what if somebody doesn't want to fulfill it after that and you're happy with the person? I just think this is not a good policy. So I'm not in support of it. I like what Ray said, which is you don't really need term limits, but if we're going to have any kind of term limit, there has to be exception. Shouldn't just be a 1-year exception. It should be that if there's somebody who doesn't want to take that position and the person that's in that wants to and the board wants the person to, then that is okay. Anyway, that's my position on that. With respect to the second one, I've been on a lot of boards where the CEO left for one reason or another, and the best person to take that temporary interim CEO position was somebody from the board, because the board knows the operation of the company, and this would prohibit that. So I'm totally opposed.
I think that the differences on that is if, for example, Sean left and I had to step in as interim CEO, I would not be a paid or compensated employee. I wouldn't expect to be. If you're, you know,
I don't know, if you're gonna be the CEO, I think you should be paid.
Pardon? Yeah, well, that's true, but you can't, you would also, I mean, there's so many other issues around that of like.
I would just say, I see your point, but I think, just the fact that if that were the case, if one of us had to step in a situation like that,
Well,
there's the provision that we can have a contract for that in that period.
That's exactly what it
So
would be. It would be a contract.
So this looks like you didn't have it until after 12 months.
No, it's saying if you're gonna contract with someone within 12 months, like okay, somebody leaves in November and we need them back in January. It just has to come to the full board for a vote. So it's public. So people see that we're doing it.
As a contract, I
Yes,
think.
I don't have any problem with
So the
requiring
first
it
year
from
would
the
have to
board.
be
It
a
should
contract.
require the.
And it could be a contract for
First year,
that
yeah.
first 12 months and then become permanent after they've been off
If
for.
that's what they decide.
If they decide.
If that-
to do
So
it.
the difference between the two bullet points, that they really should be combined. So it prohibits employment of former board members by PCE until after 12 months following the end of board service, unless that contract is approved by the board. Is that what that?
Let's take a look at the red line. That is a summary. That's not a specific language.
Okay.
So we can take a look at the red line.
Is that the intent?
The intent was two different things, like if someone wants to come and contract after their board service, within that 12 months, it would need to come to the board, even if it was under the CEO threshold. It would still need to come to the board for approval. In the scenario that you're pointing out, I think the way it would work in practicality, let's say, something happens and the board member needs to step in, it would probably be under contract. According to this, it would be under contract for that first year and then potential for employment thereafter, if that makes sense.
Wait, I don't understand. What's the difference between under contract and?
Well, because we're talking about full-time employment benefits, the whole full-time employment, right, of a staff member. So what this is meant to do is say no board member could be hired by PCE as a staff member until after a 12-month.
But they could be contracted.
Yes, but then that would have to come back to the board for full approval.
I think any of it would. I mean, if you're gonna hire someone, probably it's on the board.
No, it depends on what position it is, right?
Right.
Most of them don't come to the board, actually.
It makes
Only
it,
me.
if I can add,
Go ahead.
it makes it
Marty.
more transparent that a board member, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Us, that if we were to separate from the board, that we would have to wait 12 months. So it just provides a buffer, like, so that it influences.
Unless there's a board decision.
Contract.
With a contract.
With a contract, yeah.
Not a contract for employment, independent contractor.
Because there's no difference between somebody being on the board and being hired on a contract versus somebody who's left the board and being hired. There's
I mean,
that.
I would have a really hard time hiring one of our board members on a contract.
That would not happen.
Yeah.
Prohibited somewhere then?
It could happen. I mean, somebody could have a certain skill set that we want if they,
Then I would ask them.
then it'd
they
have
would
to come to the board though.
Well, and they would have to step out down off the
Yeah,
board.
that's a true.
That's what this is saying. If you go to the red line, what this is saying is that it's sort of it's a separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Where we're not employing board members during their service. It's prohibiting that. And for 12 months thereafter, we are not employing after service. If there's a contract arrangement that wants to be made within that first 12 months, at any level, it would need to come to the board for approval. After 12 months, it can be at the CEO's discretion.
And I don't have any problem with the person if they take a position, contract or they can't stay.
Correct. That's right. And that is clear in policy 16. Yes.
Right?
The only thing I wondered is it just a simple majority? So a lot of these things I look at questions. The 12 months is completely in line with county. So county charter says county can't play 12 months within 12 months. So but on the others, I wonder to resolve the first item 4A that Rick raised. I wonder if you can add another year with a higher question.
So are you saying add another year on, so it's 2 + 1 + 1?
2 + 1 + 1, and then afterwards to be extended only by a percentage or bigger percentage. So it would be, I mean, obviously be rare, it would be a high threshold. I might be a resolution.
I'm gonna have to vehemently disagree with this. I'm just sorry, I just disagree with you guys on this. I just think that given that we are in a more mature state of affair, we're not, I mean, I know like in corporate America, right? People are chair or vice chair for years and years and years. It happens. But they're also not elected officials appointed by a mayor onto a board. It's a completely different construct. And the issue I have is the power play in elected officialness you know, can get a little tricky. And say, for example, Ray's the supervisor, you're sort of senior guy here, if you will, like, you know, people they don't want to cross Dave or Ray, let's just say. So they just decided that they wanted to be running this thing forever. Who's gonna stand up and say, like, you gotta sit down, Ray, it's time. And then Ray's like, well, I'm not endorsing you. I mean, there's just too many interconnectednesses. And none of us are really fully independent. And with the organization running with a professional C-suite right now, 1, 2, Shalini, and 65 employees, I think the board chair role is different than when we first started, when Jeff and Dave and Rick were here for a more consistent time period, because they were literally getting the company up and running.
So the only counterpoint. The only counterpoint that's things are stable, I'll be into agreement on statements. But I think that what I'd say to Rick, where I've sort of landed on this, is that if we get into a period where it's so unstable that this will need to be amended.
That's what I was just gonna say to you.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the
this
reason we
period
took it out of the JPA agreement. Took it
Well,
out.
and one of the
so we
reasons
could
you
amend it.
may be lacking stability is you have a poor board chair. And they're sort of stuck in there. I've seen it happen. I'm gonna tell you, there's a big organization in San Mateo County who's had the same board chair for 8 years. And the person sat down, an organization we all deal with, and the person sat down and said, I can't understand why it's so dysfunctional. And I thought to myself, because you've been the board chair for 8 years and no one wants to work with you. So it just,
There's so much.
it can be though.
You got somebody who wants to take it.
I mean. I'll
Okay, go ahead.
I'll say a couple. One, I mean, you learn a tremendous amount as chair, even relative to being board member. And it helps rotating more rapidly, helps to spread more knowledge and competence throughout the board. So it gives us a deeper, stronger board as turning over the chair and vice chair more regularly. We're not a corporate, I mean, like none of us are experts enough to like actually run a corporation here. So it's not nearly, we don't have the same role as a corporate board, in my opinion. And so I think if you're talking about continuity versus, you know, diversity and changing things up, I think this board probably errs on the side of diversity, of moving, of getting more people in the position, out of position to understand something about it. And if there's a situation where we agree that somebody should stay on longer for continuity, then yeah, we override this with a majority vote or we amend it. So,
Well,
I'm gonna touch on something.
please.
So the thing that I actually do think that the level of responsibility that we have to our constituents on this board is higher than some of our other boards. And across the gamut of city council members, we have people from all sorts of varying backgrounds. The level of professionalism that being chair of this board requires is different than some of the other boards. That's not to denigrate anyone's background or experience when they come to this board. Right, we all come to go ahead and be representative of our community, but because of the relationship that this board has to deliver power and what that means to people as an essential service, there are going to be times where there's going to be a lot of representatives in this room potentially who don't have the same experience as others. And in that circumstance, I can see where there might be one person who everyone would look at and say, it makes sense for that person to be there. Because for whatever reason that's happened across the county, we have one person who does have that level of corporate experience, professional expertise, who is best in the position for reason. And that, when you get into a circumstance like that, regionally on an elected board, that can last 4 years. That can last 6 years because we all have terms upon which we serve. And the pool from which to draw into the room will be extended over that time period.
But it already does last 6 years. I'm gonna tell you why. You sit 2 or 3 years, I sat 3 as vice chair, and Rick and I worked in tandem like every day. And if he couldn't make a meeting, I could do it. I mean, we were very close. So you already had like 2 years, Marty and I talk weekly, you know, we're always, whenever there's a big issue, we always are talking, the 3 of us. But I also have Rick on my team still too. So, you know, and Jeff, I mean, you do create this sort of, like, that's why we're all sitting here. We have future potential leaders and we have past. So you are really kind of involved at a higher level for at least the 2 years before, the 2 years you're chair, And I would hope if you're still available the 2 years after you're chairing. But yes, please.
So I agree 100% with what Jeff said. I think that that's absolutely right. People get much deeper experience when they're board chair than when we're just on the board or just on the executive committee. It's a lot more work. And I think our challenge isn't the risk that somebody's going to take control of this organization. I think the risk is that somebody isn't going to raise their hand to assume that level of additional responsibility. I mean, this year we needed to convince Marty to step up as vice chair. Now, he was very accommodating of that, but it's not like we had a list of people that were jumping at it, because it's a lot of work to be the board chair. So I don't, and I don't have any problem with what Jeff said, which is we go with a 2-year term limit unless the board decides as a majority to allow for an additional extension. I think that's fine, but that's not what this says. What this says is that we have a 2-year term limit and a person could add 1 additional year. And then the wall drops. I asked legal counsel about this at the last meeting. She said, that's what it means. You can't continue. So I don't agree with that. I think that it would be fine to say we have a 2-year term limit, and that if there's no candidate for that position, a person could continue for an additional year with majority board support. But that doesn't shut it off after 1 additional year. It means that if there's nobody the next time, they could do it again. And I don't have any problem with that, because the board's making a majority decision.
I think we have a lot of excellent board members, particularly on this board. When I serve on other boards, it's just really an exceptional board. It's an exceptional organization. So I think that we will have opportunities for other people to step up. And I think the fact that there is a defined 2 1-year limit actually means that other people will feel comfortable stepping up and envisioning themselves in that role. Whereas if it's less well defined, they're more likely to get it, say, okay, there's lots of other places I can get involved. Donna's doing great. I'm not going to try. It actually gets more people involved. And as Jeff says, it gives more people this depth of experience.
But you have that if you have a 2-year term limit. I mean, it doesn't, all I'm trying to do is create a safety net.
Well, my experience with the safety net is that one, and I'm gonna probably, it is, how do I say this in such a nice way? Men have a tendency to be very comfortable extending their safety net over and over again, and women do not. And that's just the way it is. I think women have a more, I've seen it, I've worked. And so, my concern is that a certain particular type of person gets into the leadership role and they just don't want to leave. And it's intimidating for other people to have a voice to say, it's time for you to sit down. We need more diverse people. We just need more positions coming through. But
I hear that. I'm wondering, is there also the ability to go ahead and have, even within this construct, you run into that. And so the question I would have is it possible to be voted by Donna's vote?
I don't think so, because we're agency.
So it has to be, you couldn't have secret ballot.
Well, you could ask Jen. Jen, can you have a secret ballot for
Trouble if that's what we need.
Well,
yeah.
So, I mean, your point is valid. I completely agree. I see what you're saying about the situation where 3 years pass and we're still in that situation again. There's 2 ways to address that. And one would be to amend this in some ways so that you could have additional years. And the other would be simply leave it as it is, and with the knowledge that we could amend policy 16 in the the
other thing, if you guys
Which
want.
we always can,
Right.
at any
I
time.
removed it.
Yeah.
And it's much better to be in policy 16.
Yes.
Right, no, this is a good spot for it.
Yes, but I'm saying just amend policies. We can always change this later if the situation were to come up. I would be comfortable with this language as it is, with the understanding that if that situation Rick described comes up, we revisit this.
I mean, you could easily have a situation where the vice mayor and the mayor, the mayor and the vice
Sure.
vice chair and the vice chair don't get reelected for some reason, lose their seats. I mean, there's gonna be people on this.
Yeah.
Right now who are in very competitive races who might lose their seats. Freddie lost his seat, it happens. So that's just, I guess, Ray, that's your sort of risk world in which we live in, which is different than corporate America, right? Like, no one's gonna not get elected. Your risk is human risk. It's different.
Yeah, we can't control the pool that we brought from.
Yes.
We can't control the security. So, and you can't control the pool that we brought from, you can't control within that pool who's gonna raise their hand. And all of that happens at a random course with what's happening in the market and shit. And so, you can imagine a scenario within that we have bad market conditions in the business again. So, and that's the only thing that I'm trying to down, that I know it's like the risk probability on that's probably low. And so that's why I'm comfortable at this point looking at this.
And then
saying,
Jeff
well,
will
we need to
then,
amend it. We
for
can't.
a year and get you to run the companies. Go ahead, yes.
What if leaving the language that's there, but with deference to what both Jeff and Rick have said, we added a caveat that the board may declare extenuating circumstances that warrant further consideration of reappointment of the chair and vice chair, leaving it open, but setting a firm policy.
I think that's
preceding
what,
that.
I mean, I think that's what this says, I think, but because the extenuating circumstances.
So,
Go ahead.
can I clarify?
Yeah, please.
And then I do want to say,
We'll just call for a
I
vote.
think it's all gonna be okay,
Yeah.
no matter what happens here.
That's right.
I wanna lighten everything a little bit, because you're forgetting that there's also a CEO in the mix of this,
I
right?
totally agree.
So, but what is said in policy 16 is exactly what's there, and then it says if there needs to be a break, there can be a break of 12 months, and then that person could come back. Jen had advised earlier against having extenuating circumstance language in there because we had asked about that early on. Because it's a legitimate, I think that makes sense. But apparently that becomes problematic legally because then you have to define every
What
bit of
is the extenuating circumstance?
So it becomes this circular discussion. So the reason that we moved it to policy 16 is so that if there was an extenuating circumstance and the board needed to act on that, you would amend policy 16, which you can do in 1 month instead of a JPA agreement, which is
Yeah.
the whole thing. So I think that was the feedback we got.
You're probably better off now putting in a higher threshold vote than leaving it to a simple majority. Because you would have created the precedent that it require some higher level of expression prior to doing.
Well, the only other way you could do this is you know, I mean, just in my own particular case is, I'm trying to think about bringing up who's going to have this board role behind me. It's going to depend a lot on election going on, because I don't want to just run my course and then leave and now a new person has come. I'm thinking about my own succession planning, as I think it's important for all of us to do. So that, the other way you could do it is you could say a 3-year term, but I, as the person who's chairing, can not accept a 3rd year. I mean, they can always, they can run for 1 and say, I'm done. It was too much. I don't want to do more. You could leave it a little more in that regard. I mean,
Isn't that what exists right now?
that is what exists right now. I agree. I just think 3 years is a very long time, because it takes 6 years, then you have to sit 3 and then 3, that's 6 years. It's a very long time in the world of, and I think that's actually harder to fill than it is 2 years of vice chair and 2 years of chair.
But you don't have to fill 3 years, you just fill 1 year. I don't understand that. Dave didn't do the 3rd year. That's a personal decision. maybe people
Yeah,
feel
go ahead.
pressure, they have to do the whole thing.
Jen, please.
Just commenting on an earlier comment, we did discuss a more than a simple majority vote at the board meeting. That would require a further amendment of the JPA that's not anticipated by the documents that we have before us. An entirely different section on voting requirements.
Oh, thank you, Jen.
So let's knock these out backwards, maybe. Instead of voting on all of them at once, Jen, is it all right if we do 3, 2, and then 1?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just because we have a lot on the agenda when we get through, can I see if there's anyone willing to make a motion on number 3, section 4E, which is the attendance procedures? Yeah.
Clarification
Yes,
on number
please.
3, the unexcused absence, does that, so as absence, does it count if you already arrange your own alternate? I don't think that should count as an
If
absence.
you what?
Arrange your own alternate to show up at the meeting.
That's right, that's okay.
That's
That's
okay.
still
An
your
absence,
seat.
right?
So an absence
Doesn't
is,
excuse them or not.
it's not an absence.
It's not an absence. Right, that's just what I
Right.
clarified.
So
Yeah.
it would be you call and let us know that you and your alternate will not be there and your seat will be vacant, so we can figure out the quorum.
That's an excuse.
That's an excuse.
That's an
absence.
excuse absence.
Yeah.
Unexcused is you don't call, you just don't show up.
Nobody's
No-
there.
No
Yeah.
show, no alternate.
If you
nothing.
call, if
Got
you personally call and say you're gonna come, or your alternates, doesn't show up, like, for whatever reason, it's last minute, doesn't have daycare, I think you're fine, because you called to say you were not gonna be there. You can't control the other person, right? So I think what we're really getting at is just repeated no-shows.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'll make a
Yes.
motion.
So the number 3, and 3 unexcused absences is an awful lot, and this says after this number of unexcused absences, you contact the board member, basically give notice. Hey, if you have another unexcused absence, we're then gonna go to your city manager, mayor, or city council to request a replacement. I think we should do that after 2 unexcused absences. This is the third. It would take the third to initiate that activity. This language would take the 4th to initiate that activity.
Can we
Or for
alter it here?
30 days. So
Yeah, I mean, what,
You just call. Excuses, just call.
You better learn. You're gonna be off this board before we know it.
Is there somebody with their hand up?
Bring your party.
we just trying to like stays.
Just to clarify, are you saying that we have a vote for each section? So
Each item here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're starting with item 3, because I felt like that was kind of the easiest. So, but obviously that is not. So do we want to move to more than 2 and add the word unexcused absences, and staff will contact, okay? Is everyone okay with that? In a year. In a year. I would say a rolling year, in a 12-month period.
We could say at the third absence, we will notify.
Yeah.
Yes, instead of saying more than 3, because right now it says 4.
That's right. More than 2 absences, and staff will notify the board members to resolve the issue. If there is a third absence,
Just because it say more than 3, then it means, oh.
Okay, got it. So if they're, okay. So, got it.
The options the board will.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a motion for that?
Wait, I think you should probably put down what is an excuse, defining the excuse. Definition, you probably should define that, it's depending on board chair and personal relationship.
And an
Notified.
unexcused absence is defined as no notification to, the CEO, either written notification or call or text, call, write, or text the board chair, the board vice chair, or the staff. There's a variety of people you can call.
so is this discussion resulting in saying if there are 2 unexcused absences within a 12-month period?
Yes.
Then the staff will notify.
Yeah.
So usually when this happens, It happens in succession. So we're saying, and this is something that Nellie brought up before she went out, if this is a continued problem, then we're gonna deal with it directly first. And then we're gonna go, and this is something that PCE hasn't had to do, and we hope it doesn't, but it may. So we want the ability as staff to go and say, this needs to be resolved.
If there are 2 unexcused absences from a board meeting. Or from a
Board
board
and
or
committee.
committee meeting.
Board and committee. That's why it was 3, to get a little bit of breathing room. If you sit on, there are a couple of board members who sit on both the board and committees, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, right,
So
so,
it's like 2 unexcused absences, 1 from board. If I miss 1 board meeting and 1 executive committee meeting, then.
that's not the way it's written. It's not, okay, thank you, all right. We can go back and, I'm just trying to clean up no shows.
If a member jurisdiction has more than, and its member jurisdiction has more than 3 absences at board meetings or 3 absences at standing committee meetings.
Instead of and, it's written on.
It's written or,
Okay.
and it's actually written as absences, member jurisdiction.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but to take care of that alternate.
To take care of absence.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so are you comfortable with board and committee attendance, or do you want to just leave it at the board level? Most of the time, people who are absent a lot are not sitting on committees, but
I think it's better to focus on the board, but,
I kind of
well,
agree.
we've had experience with committee meetings where people don't show up, but they're just volunteers on the committees, they can just resign.
How about if we just specifically say executive committee and finance and audit committee? Those are
Standing
the
committees.
standing committees. Because I think the other ones are a little more lackadaisical. Or they're not lackadaisical, they're just less,
Formal, they're not formal, they're not standing.
and you
And
know.
they're not
really
brown
not
egg.
things. Yeah, they're not brown egg. Big control. All you have to do is call.
Right.
Yeah, right. You know, it's just I mean, text to anyone, so they can say it.
Well, raise an alternative, neither can.
Yeah.
It's,
It's. And I mean, at the end of the day, we don't really have jurisdiction to remove somebody off the board. Only the cities do. So what we're really doing is creating a process by which we can let the city manager and the mayor know, hey, your people aren't showing up and representing you at the meeting, and then they can sort it out. Yeah, and then they can sort it out. And then if the mayor or the city manager comes back and says, I've had a meeting with Donna, she now understands, you know, she didn't understand, which is totally, totally reasonable. She'll start being there, maybe that's how you resolve it. Because no one else is available to go. She's the only person. There's also situations where people have other conflicting meetings on that night, but that's the only person available on that night to go because the other people work or whatever. So we just have to do our best. And I think it really is just a policy to let people know, hey, your people aren't showing up.
And staff wanted this, so we had some guidance for when we could reasonably step in to fix the problem. That's really where this comes from.
but once again, if someone calls and says, no one can make the meeting,
That's fine. That's an excuse.
fine. So we're really talking about
Just no shows, total no shows.
right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
So do you want to put in county manager?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
yes. Who appoints it? The board chair. It's the board chair, right? Right?
Yeah, but I would just leave it with the county manager.
Okay, leave it to Mike and let Mike know. All right.
so can we have the actual language read that we're gonna be voting on?
Right now,
Well,
Okay.
at some point.
Yeah.
If the no.
it will be coming to the board. It's gonna be coming to the board. So our thought here
Okay,
would be to take your amendments. We'll clean those up after this meeting and it'll come to the board for full adoption.
and you read what you understand the.
So I don't have the red line in front of me, apologies, but what I understand the amendment to be for section 4E as currently on the table would be more than 2 unexcused absences. And that in the second part, the board chair will direct staff letter to the city or county manager, mayor. Right? That's what I understand those changes to be.
It's board and executive and finance, audit. And finance.
It's standing committees,
Standing
yes.
Board and standing committees.
So
Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Okay, does someone want to make a motion to recommend this to the full board? Okay, so we have some move. Colleen, I can take a second. Okay, Jeff and then Colleen. Roll call vote, please. Do we know?
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion, anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Sorry, I didn't know if someone was online. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 2, section 4F. So this is the revolving door policy. And what we've come up with is it would prohibit employment of former board members by, when we say employment, full-time benefited employment of former board members by PCE until 12 months following the end of their service. Yes, please.
Jen,
Oh, Jen, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we are taking public comment. I'm not sure who's.
Oh, yes, okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who have any comment on any of these before we continue voting or on the one we voted? Okay, thanks, Jen, so much, appreciate it. And Brianna, if there's ever someone who's raising their hand in the public, please just let me know. Definitely get them in. Okay, so it would prohibit the employment of a former board member, full-time employment of a former board member until after 12 months following their conclusion of board service, and allow us to contract with a former board member within 12 months with the approval of the board, the majority approval of the board. Yes, that's it.
I'm wondering why we're saying full-time benefited as opposed to just employment.
yeah, does it say
Okay.
full time?
I don't know, but I thought you wanted
Does
a
not.
distinction between a contract employee and an employee.
Would you like to add that?
Do you want that or not? And the only reason I'm asking is because the difference between contracted employee who's not gonna get benefits.
You're
And
gonna have part-time. So. Remember the language. This is full time.
It's, Jen, excuse me. Sorry that this is challenging today. I need to ask you, Jen, if you would please track for us the red line. I've got notes going. I believe it does not reference full-time or part-time. It's simply employment versus contract.
okay, is that okay with everyone? All right. Any more questions on that? Yes, anyone? Ray, don't raise your glass. I thought you were raising your hand there for a minute. I was like, yes. So, okay, if I can then please get a motion on this. Betty, thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
No changes?
no
Is that right?
changes, that's fine. And motion carry, any nays? All right, motion carries unanimously, thank you. All right, let's go then to the TEPI 4A chair and vice chair. I'm gonna just be quiet on this and let you guys talk about it and decide. So if someone wants to make a motion, a particular motion, we can vote on it. If it gets voted down, we'll take a second motion. That's Betsy.
I'd like to make it the way it is.
You'd like to make a motion to leave it as is, okay. We have a second. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any no's? Okay, motion carries unanimously. I assume if you abstain, you'll let me know.
Got to abstain.
Abstaining, okay. Rick abstains. Motion does not carry, motion carries with one abstention. Okay, so we've at least plowed through those. Let's move on to the next item. Thank you all, that was, appreciate all the comments. The next item is the recommend to the board of directors approval for an execute prepaid transaction.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We didn't even make it to this one.
Oh, we still have more.
That's why, sorry,
Oh.
apologies if I seemed a little impatient.
Okay.
We need to get through this agenda item before we move on.
Okay.
So the second part of the overall agenda item here today was to just make corresponding amendments to the JPA agreement
Mhm.
in accordance with the term limits that we have just been discussing. So you'll see in red the This is the actual language, Rick. Director DeGolia, that is in the JPA agreement now. It essentially remands it to our policies.
Okay.
This document has been sent out to member agencies again as part of our 30-day requirement, so that we will be able to vote on both policy 16 and this JPA agreement as a package, because they do correspond.
Okay.
So that's coming to the board in September.
Okay.
And the change to the JPA agreement is what's in
Okay.
there.
That's correct.
All right, is everyone okay with that? Does anyone have questions? Any members of the public have comment? Okay, great. If everyone's okay with this, I would accept a motion, please. Thank you, Rick. We have a motion by Rick and a second by Colleen. Sorry, I'm just going with first names just to expedite.
I know, I'm sorry. Me too.
It's okay. I think it's okay. If everyone's okay with that. All right, motion to approve.
I think it was moved by.
Second.
So we have a first, we have a second. Okay, I'll take, right, you got that? We have the first and second, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone abstain? Anyone no? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. You should have started with that one, Sean. That was easy.
No. Okay.
All right, clicker to you. All right, thanks, Nick. We're moving on to the PCE prepay transaction. I think everybody remembers we've had this brought to us 2 or 3 times. Yeah. So.
Can you start from the beginning again?
No.
Sure. 1-page overview, because we presented to you back in April, but I'm guessing it hasn't been top of your mind. So this page is almost identical. Some of the numbers have been updated from what was presented in April, but just to try and get everyone back on the same page, because again, it's been a while, that a prepay is a financial transaction that allows tax exempt entities, i.e. ourselves, to potentially realize pretty meaningful power procurement cost savings. The savings are driven by the difference between tax exempt interest rates, so the rate at which we would, or through CCCFA, but basically we would issue debt, and the rate at which another entity like a bank or an insurance company would borrow money. And I know that sounds like tax arbitrage, which is sort of a 4-letter word, a no-no, but it is actually codified in the US tax law to specifically allow the prepay of energy. This kind of transaction, as I mentioned before, it's been around for over 30 years, mostly up until the last few years, utilized in the natural gas industry. And only recently, in the last 3 years, has it been applied to the renewable energy sector. And over the last 3 years, there have been 12 CCA prepay transactions. When we met before, it was 11. So there's been 1 since that I'll go through in a little detail. And it's about $70 million of annual savings a year across those 12 transactions. That savings is about 8 to 12% of the PPA costs. So if a PPA, if we're paying a developer, say, I'm just making up numbers, $10 million a year, we could potentially save, I'm just going to pick the middle of that number, 10%. So that's $1 million of savings that PCE could realize, or CCAs would realize. And just as a reminder, it's been about 5 months, but we presented to this committee back in April. You unanimously recommended sort of continued pursuit of a prepay transaction, and then we went to the board and they did the same. And so that's just a quick refresher. Sorry I'm going quick, but happy to answer any questions. So what have we been doing since April? So here is a list of some of the activities. We've been head down, busy to this point, and there's more work to be done. First thing we did is we ran an RFP for the prepaid supplier, which is really the fancy name for the investment bank that we'll utilize to basically execute this transaction. We met with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, RBC. Those are really only the 3 players, and decided to go with Goldman Sachs back in June. So we've been working with them, connected for the last 3 or 4 months. With them, we've sort of been creating the structure of this transaction. There were some nuances or different structures and bells and whistles we could have gone with. I won't bore you with, but we sort of determined what structure we want to go with. And then importantly, which of our PPAs we want to include in the transaction. Some are longer, some are shorter, some have longer prices. I mean, some higher prices, some have less. There was also a type of transaction where we would have just put in short-term, not PPAs, and then replaced it. I won't bore you, but we sort of came together on the transaction that we're now sort of marching forward with. That allowed us to sort of really refine the savings opportunity. I will caveat any number in this presentation is an estimate. It is largely driven by the markets, which I'll go through in a little more detail. So I don't want you to get too focused on any one number, but based on today and the way the structure is set up, it would be about $5 million a year of savings for us. That number could go up or down based on the markets, that spread that I described. It could also go up or down based on the size of the transaction, which I'll go into a little more detail. We also joined CCCFA as an associate member. CCCFA is the conduit issuer who would actually issue these bonds. So to do that, we needed to become a member, and we went to their board last month, and they unanimously approved our membership. So that's checked the box there. Those are sort of all the things we've definitively done. Sort of going to the bottom row. One of the call outs when I talked to my peers who've done transactions, they said is just to be mindful of the settlement process post-transaction. It's a little more complicated. That's sort of one of the only negatives of, if you want to call it. So we've really tried to take that feedback. We spent a lot of time with Goldman, Roy and his team, trying to understand what that's going to look like post-transaction. It won't happen until like January or February, so we have a lot of time, but we've been spending time to make sure that we understand how that'll work. The second thing we've been doing and will continue to do is just monitoring the financial markets. And I have a page and a couple slides that goes through where we are today, what's happened, some of the one deal that's done since we talked about, but that's what we continue to do. We meet every week, we discuss what's going on, what's the nuances with the muni market, the long-term taxable rates, economy, things like that. And then the final thing, and there's a page in here on all the documents, but we continue to negotiate and finalize the myriad of documents that are needed to execute this transaction. There's sort of two key ones that I'll go into in a second, but this is sort of all the activities that have been happening for the last, 5 months. Mm-hmm. Oh, and before I start, I do have, it's a big team we have, a lot of people helping us. And I have on the line Doug Bird, who is with Chapman Cutler, our legal counsel, and Mike Berwanger, who is our financial advisor. So they're on the phone if they just showed up on screen. If anyone has any questions, I'll actually ask Mike to talk a little bit about the markets, since you thought you might be interested in hearing straight from the market experts. So this is I haven't actually printed them all out because I'm trying to save trees, but I think it would be like this high of a pile. But there are a lot of documents that will need to be that are being finalized. Not as much negotiated because there's sort of a standardization. There's been a lot of deals before us. The ones that and I'm happy to, Doug's the expert, the lawyer. He can go into details in any of these if are interested. The three that I'll highlight. The most important one probably is the first one, the Clean Energy Purchase Contract. This is it's our agreement to buy power for 30 years with CCCFA. Very similar to a PPA we might enter into with a developer, but we are now going to be buying power from CCCFA. So that's sort of probably the key document. The second one is the limited assignment agreements. To make these transactions work, we have PPAs, as you all know, that we've entered into. We need to assign those PPAs into the transaction so that for the developer or the power producer, they are no longer facing us. They're facing the prepaid LLC, essentially Goldman Sachs. And so we assign that into the transaction. There's a lot of controls and such that if something goes wrong, it reverts the way it is today. Thankfully, there's been 12 CCAs before us, as I mentioned. And so a lot of the developers are the same, the Calpines of the world. And so they're somewhat comfortable with this. It's a little bit of a pain for them because there's really nothing in it for them. They all ask right away, well, what's in it for me? But so we're working through, we're not done with all those negotiations, but that's sort of where we're spending a lot of time. Roy and his team who have those relationships are leading the charge there. The next 5 or 6, I would call largely administrative. I'm not trying to minimize them, but they're not as exciting a documents. And the last one is the preliminary official statement. This is sort of a marketing document. There's nothing to sign here, but the board will need to approve this document. It's largely legalese. There is a section in there that describes PCE's organization and the operations, and we're working on drafting that. So that'll be ready by the board meeting for them to approve. So those are a summary of the deal documents, and we have a lot of legal support helping us along the way. Market overview, and I'll have, yeah.
I just asked a question.
Yeah, of course, sorry.
So, the way, I'd like all of us to understand this at a gut level as much as we can. And it sounds like, given the assignment in the second document, we're assigning the PPAs that we have entered into, that we're contractually bound to, over to Goldman Sachs. And then Goldman Sachs does something, and money ultimately, I'm not sure if this is right, I'm just guessing, money ultimately comes into CCCFA, and then they pay us, is that correct?
They provide, I'm sorry, this is so small. So this is in the appendix. So this yeah, it's in the packet too. The PPA assignment is what we're talking about. Peninsula Clean Energy assigns the PPA to the prepaid supplier, which is essentially Goldman Sachs. It's J. Aron, which is a division of Goldman Sachs. Okay. The way it works is, I'll just start in the middle. CCCFA issues bonds. They go to the tax exempt market and they raise muni debt, say $1 billion in our example. That is the money that's actually being prepaid. So they take that $1 billion and they prepay for power. They say, we will buy power for the next 30 years from you, prepaid supplier. Prepaid supplier is the one who now has the assigned PPAs. And so they take that $1 billion, send it to prepaid supplier, Goldman Sachs essentially.
Okay, so wait, so the money goes from the bonds up to CCCFA? Correct. And then it goes from CCCFA over to prepaid electric supplier?
Exactly. And then from there, what we're doing is we will do essentially an RFP to decide the taxable entity that wants that $1 billion. There will be an insurance company that says, I'd like to borrow $1 million at their taxable rate. So say it's 5%. And I will take that $1 billion and give you interest every month in return. And so they take that bit. So the $1 billion goes from bonds to CCCFA to prepaid LLC over to it's called intermediary bank. And we will run an RFP for who that will be, but whoever gives us the best rate, who's willing to pay the highest spread.
And are they doing that for 30 years?
Yes. Yes, they entered a 30-year loan. Exactly. And so that's how the initial money flows. Every month.
Well, hang on. They enter into a loan for the initial reset period for the bonds. So one of the things about these transactions that has facilitated, the ability to get them done, whether they be natural gas or power, is the idea that the tax exempt bonds and that funding arrangement that we're just talking about will be for a period that is, the most efficient in terms of the difference between taxable and tax exempt rates. So just like if, a municipal entity were to, say you issue tax exempt bonds to build a building, right? And the useful life of that building is going to be 30 years. You could finance it with 30-year debt, or you could finance it with, shorter term debt that you intend to roll over. So the same concept applies here. So that intermediary bank funding arrangement will be the best funding that we can find relative. There's two pieces to it, which frustrates the intermediary banks a little bit in terms of their, whether they win the bid or not, is not just their rate that they offer, but the differential between, where the CCCFA bonds are issued for that period. So the bonds will actually have a 30-year maturity, but they have a 7-year, roughly, whatever, put. So the bonds will be, either refinanced, or there's a couple of different ways to do it from a tax standpoint. But basically, you're looking at a refinancing and a guarantee from our prepaid supplier that they will continue to deliver to you a level of savings that's satisfactory to you in order for you to continue with the transaction, right, on all those subsequent refundings. So that loan, sorry, Nick, to interrupt, but that's not a 30-year loan. That'll be
right, 7 years or 5 or 10, whatever the optimal we decide.
Right.
So that's how the money flows originally, and then every month, developer, let's make up Calpine, delivers their power essentially to prepaid LLC, to the CCCFA, to us. Obviously, the electrons don't flow that way, but in the end, we get the power, same as we are today, every month from CCCFA essentially. And that's that first contract I described is the contract between us and CCCFA in the upper left part of this diagram.
Right, and that will reflect that discounted price, and that discount will be in effect for your initial period, and then when the intermediary bank, loan is refinanced for a subsequent period, it'll be different, but at or above an agreed minimum.
Makes sense. So good clarification. I put it in the appendix. It can get confusing with all the diagrams, but hopefully people can understand it. Complicated. So anyway, these all documents basically make all that happen. I know that's probably the lawyers are getting mad at me for describing it that way, but make sure the rules of engagement, how things work, if things go sideways, what happens. That's basically what these documents are. CCCFA really is just a conduit. It's like the last, second, and third from the bottom are basically saying, we'll handle everything, we'll pay the fees, things like that. So markets. So as I mentioned before, and Mike, I'm going to ask you to jump in here after I sort of set the stage. Again, it's really simple, or maybe not really simple, but the savings that we realized through all this mechanics is basically the difference between tax exempt rates. I'm going to just make up numbers, 4% say, and taxable rates, 5%. That's a 1% difference, 100 basis points. And that savings is basically, it's kind of shared with everyone who plays in this, but we get a good portion of that savings. So the higher the bigger that delta, the spread, the more savings. And so what this graph on the left is, or there's kind of the same graphs, just different time periods, is the difference between SOFR swaps, that's basically a benchmark for taxable rates that replace LIBOR, and MMD is the muni tax exempt rates across 2 points in the curve, 5 and 10 years. We may do 7, but this is just to give you an idea. And it shows you the difference between those two rates over the last, 5 years, 3 years. And you can see, and then the graph on the right sort of blows out year to date since January 1. And unfortunately, that spread, so higher spread is better. As I mentioned, 100 basis points is better. That spread's come down over the last 4 months. A lot of it's come down to just because taxable rates are lower. So there's less, if tax exempts are typically say 70% of taxable rates, as taxable rates go down from 5 to 4%, the spread goes down. And so you've seen that graph come down from top, from obviously downward sloping, which is unfortunate. What we're doing is we're obviously monitoring this on a weekly basis. I wanted to caveat that we are looking right now, we're rushing to try and get ready as quickly as possible so that we can access the market, assuming the economics are favorable, the savings that we can realize that I referenced. I want to stress that we're not going to do a deal if the savings aren't there, or if we don't think the savings are worthwhile, or if we think it's beneficial to wait. CPA, as I mentioned, there's been one CCA that's done a deal since we last met. A CPA, our peer to the south in LA, did a $1 billion deal, or I don't know, about a month ago. They were getting ready to do a deal. They were planning to announce a transaction and then price it like next week. They were looking at savings, unfortunately, in the 9% range, high 9%. But they were going to sort of get in the market, see what's there. Very quickly, interest rates moved such that the spread increased and they decided to pounce. They ended up pricing a deal on a Friday, which is rare in the bond market because they wanted to take advantage of that savings. And they were able to do a deal with about 12% savings. So it's a case study, which we want to follow, of just being ready. We want to get to the market. We want to get the documents approved. We want to get the board's approval so that when the markets are there, we can move.
And if we get all this lined up and ready to go, is there sort of a like an expiration date on it? Like it just goes forever. You guys then have the authority to issue.
Exactly.
And you can do this one and then do another one. It's just like a single.
We're going to get approval just to do one deal.
Okay, one deal.
So we can only do one deal, but there is a chance, hopefully it doesn't play out this way. And we put in at the finance committee's recommendation, a threshold below which we definitively won't do a deal. It's 9% is what we're saying. And I'll go through that in a second and how we came up with 9%. So if it's below 9%, we're just not moving forward. We may even still not do a deal if it's below 10%.
Yeah.
But we wanted some sort of threshold. And so there is a chance, and Mike was describing it's happened in the gas space where we could get board approval and the markets just kind of turn south for a couple months. And we won't have announced a deal, but we will have the documents ready. We'll be monitoring, and it could be 2, 3, 6, 9 months. Mike, you want to add anything quickly on the markets that you've seen since you're closest to it?
You did a great job. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, I mean, two things, right? And I think you hit it really well, Nick. I think it's a little counterintuitive, right? You normally, when you're going to borrow debt, you want to get the lowest rate possible. That's not necessarily what you want here. You want the highest delta between these two rates possible. What I would point out is, we've been doing these transactions for CCAs now since 2021, almost this entire curve on the left. And even when that spread was really low, it was harder, but we were still getting transactions done close to that 10% level. So I think we've seen a very favorable market, but as you can see, it's been very volatile. So to Nick's point, you put yourself in a position to be lucky and to be successful, and you set your goals and give yourselves some flexibility, just like CPA did.
Does anyone have questions, or are there more? There's more?
There's more, sorry, I'll be quick. But so this is just, you probably want to know, what does this mean for us? So this is sort of the economics. I will caveat, as I said before, don't get too focused on any one number because the savings will change, the size of the deal. We are currently moving forward with 4 PPAs that we've highlighted we want to include in this transaction. We may swap out, replace one for another. We're negotiating the LAAs. We may decide we want to downsize the size of the deal and just do 3 PPAs. We may want to do all 5. So I'm just using 4 as a good example. I think that's where we'll end up. That represents about 850,000 megawatt hours, which is about 20% of our load. The cash flows associated with those megawatt hours are $45 million. That's how much we pay a year about to purchase that power. And so if you assume a 10% savings on that $45 million, that's $4.5–5 million of savings a year to PCE that we would realize. And then the last is the bond value, which doesn't really matter as much, but basically that's 30 years of cash flow discounted back. And so we'd raise about $1 billion of bonds for this all to work. Timeline. So where do we go from here? There's only a couple more weeks until we at least want to be ready to be in the market. We have the executive committee meeting this week. We're going to finalize our financial model. I mentioned that we're going to go to bid for the upper right box on that schematic, the funding recipient, the ones who are going to bid us the cost of funding. So we started last week, we launched a process to get the best rate, and we're going to receive, I'm excited to see what the numbers are, but I think on Wednesday, Goldman said. And so from there, we'll see, that'll help us finalize what the savings will be. I won't list all these bullet points, but you can see there's a lot of work to be getting between now and the board meeting. We'll reach out to the rating agencies next week. These bonds will be rated by a green bond verifier, which will help with the interest rate. We have the PCE and CCCFA board meeting the week of September 23rd, where hopefully the board will approve moving forward. And then I put in green here, basically start marketing. And I will caveat, this is pending market conditions. We won't launch a deal unless we at least feel we can definitely get the 9% savings, and it's probably even closer to 10. But that'll be a big decision point. And then from there, it takes about a week to price the bonds, and then a week after that to close the bonds. But again, I caveat that could move out. So this is just maybe, I guess you could say, a best case timeline. Any questions? Anyone? So in summary, we'd like you to recommend to the board approval to complete a prepay transaction subject to market conditions and a minimum savings. We've come up with a minimum threshold of 9%. Just as a reference point, I looked at some of our peers. CPA's minimum was 7, MCE's was 8, 3CE's was 9%. We took the high end of that range. Again, I'm not saying we'll do a deal at 9.1%, but we at least want to put that as the minimum floor. If God forbid, we do a deal at 9%, which sort of be the lowest, that's still about $4 million of savings a year. So not as good as 5, but nothing to sneeze about.
That's $4 million savings on 4 PPAs.
4
If we
PPAs.
did 5 PPAs, it'd be more.
It would be more. Yep. It's still that 10% about, or not, it would be 9% in this example of whatever the cash flow is associated with those PPAs. Exactly. That's it. So I went fast, but
No, really appreciate it. We've seen it. This is probably the 4th or 5th one, so we're good. Does anyone have questions of Nick or Sean? I we all understand this? Yes. Okay, I just want to take public comment.
That's right.
Public comment? We have no public comment. Okay, great. I'll take Rick's move approval and Marty's second. All right. All those in favor? Anyone no or abstain? Okay, so we have motion carried unanimously. Great. Thank you, Nick. Good job. Okay.
Okay, this is the controversial topic ever in PC
more
history.
controversial than board term limits.
Yeah. That was good. That was good. No, it's okay. No, I wasn't arguing. To get over.
Since Sean wasn't there, for most of you, I think, who were here, remember, maybe some are new. We did have a discussion of this several years ago with CEO Pepper, and it was a very close vote, basically right down the middle, until I think some arms were twisted and persuaded to go the other way. But it's an important element of our overall strategic thinking, because nuclear is not going away right now, it's staying. And we just wanted to bring it back for reconsideration as we have more data now.
Okay, so I will ask that my colleagues Jeremy Wayan and Roy Zhu come on to the camera. Because the three of us will be giving this presentation today. I'm going to beg your patience. There are a lot of slides today because it was very important to us to really be thorough in level setting where we are today versus 4 years ago when this came up. And then I also will let you know that this nearly identical presentation will be brought on Thursday to our CBO partners, just to get some feedback from our partners in the out in our territory, as well as it'll be heard by the CAC on Thursday night. All of this leading up to a board decision coming up at the end of the month. So for this item, this is a discussion item for today, because we did not want to ask the executive committee to preempt the CAC.
Why is that?
I just, as a courtesy, honestly, it's a professional courtesy.
To the board or to them?
To both. I would say we needed to complete our process originally, just to understand the whole thing. We brought it to the procurement subcommittee at the end of August. There were not enough procurement subcommittee members there. So at that point, we decided it was best to remand it, to bring it to executive committee. Otherwise it would have, okay, that's why. All righty, so let's get into the part of it here. Our goal today is to just provide you all the information that you need to understand regarding the nuclear attribute allocation. It is not a nuclear power with actual physical power at allocation. We want to have you all understand what the decision will do and what it would not do, and then receive your feedback. So the question at hand will be to the full board: should Peninsula Clean Energy elect to take an annual allocation of carbon-free attributes from Diablo Canyon for the calendar years 2025 to 2030? If not, why not? And so Chair Colson already mentioned the previous vote that this board took several years ago. We do want to point out that things have changed. There have been new laws and new requirements, new regulatory requirements of all LSCs that present this in maybe a different light than last time. Just very briefly, we think it's very important for everybody to understand what we're talking about here. So this is an allocation It is something that is voluntary in this case, not allocation, all allocations are voluntary. It is something that is, we can take or not. It is not direct procurement, it is not contracting, in this case for nuclear power, or physical energy generated by a power plant. It's an allocation of attributes, which are the accounting and reporting value of a unit of energy, in this case, carbon-free. Nuclear is considered a carbon-free resource. An attribute is not a unit of physical energy. So just level setting there is very important. So our discussion will center on a couple of things. A decision whether to accept it or reject it for a 5-year period. We have the option to revisit this every year. And we are going to be looking at it, staff will be looking at it to see if it makes sense within where we're at with our renewable goals as well. So where it really lands for us in just the plainest of terms is that it would show up, if we take it, it would show up in our power content label, and it would show up or not in the form of avoided costs in our budget. So those are really the two places where this has real literal impact. What it's not is us buying nuclear power from Diablo Canyon. It's not. This is not us adding new nuclear power to the grid, and it is not a decision that impacts state policy or the development of any new nuclear going forward. So regardless of what we do, the acceptance or rejection will have no impact on the extension of Diablo Canyon. That's already been decided. That was approved several years ago. It will continue to run at full capacity. We cannot cause the plant to stop, be interrupted, increase or decrease operations. Every customer in our state, PCE and otherwise, will start paying for the Diablo Canyon allocation starting in 2025. So whether or not PCE elects to show it, all of our customers up and down the state are going to be paying a fee now for that extension starting in 2025. Already mentioned, our decision has no impact on the physical grid, and we will continue receiving a resource adequacy allocation as part of operations. And that helps us reach our RA obligations, which you all know are substantial.
Wait,
so
question on that.
Yes.
Do we continue receiving an RA allocation irregardless of how we decide on
Correct.
this?
That's correct. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Jeremy. He's going to do a quick background on the regulatory landscape and history here. Jeremy?
Hey there, folks. I hope everyone can hear me all right. So
yes.
Diablo Canyon, hopefully I would guess the majority of you are very familiar with this resource already, but it's located in San Luis Obispo County. It's owned and operated by PG&E. It's been operational since the mid-80s. And it does have the clearance from NERC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission at the federal level, to operate until late this year for one reactor and mid next year under their operating licenses. And as we will get into the next slide, it was slated to be retired. PG&E had proposed to retire the asset, and then Newsom and the legislature decided otherwise. So let's move to the next slide. So back in 2018, the PG&E sought and received approval from the commission to retire Diablo Canyon. And in doing so, they also elected not to seek a relicensing process with NERC as well to keep the plant operational further. And I believe the board conversation the last go around was about 2020. So we were in that period where it was planned for Diablo to retire. There was some news publications and such floating around about, oh, we should do this, we should keep it going by certain interest groups, but it was still very much formally going through the steps of retiring. And it wasn't till 2022 and the few years before that where we had really severe strains on the reliability of our electricity service due to wildfires and due to other risks. And that really caused the administration and the legislature to take pause and to re-examine, are we truly ready to operate without Diablo Canyon being present? As noted on the prior slide, it's about 2 gigawatt facility. It's a substantial amount of electricity and capacity that's being provided to the market by this power plant. And so ultimately the legislature and the Newsom administration determined that the plant should be extended, the operation of the plant should be extended by another 5 years for reliability purposes, for decarbonization goals, economic, and I'd say even equity considerations as well. The reality is if this plant shuttered, the majority of the replacement power would be coming from increased use of gas facilities located largely in or near to disadvantaged communities. And there were a variety of regulatory and policy considerations going on, but I would say it was largely a political discussion and decision to keep this plant operating for another 5 years. Next slide. And in the negotiated legislation there, they do obligate PG&E to extend the potential to allocate these greenhouse gas-free attributes to CCAs, since the CCA customers are helping pay for this asset. The CCAs have the choice to take those allocations. If we do, we then have to represent that receipt of allocations on our power content label. So the emissions attributes, these are greenhouse gas-free attributes, but they are coming from a nuclear facility, does need to be represented on the label, and the procurement team will get into the finer points of what that means a bit later on. And if we or other CCAs elect not to take these allocations, they don't go back into the market, they simply disappear. So that's kind of the frame of what we can and cannot do based on the legislation. Next slide. And just acknowledge that there are significant historical concerns around the operation of this plant. It is built right adjacent to a number of fault lines on the coast. It is also therefore in a tsunami risk area, and the communities adjacent to that power plant are in that risk area. And there are ongoing concerns, as I just alluded to at the top 2 points, around continued safe operations of the facility, especially as it ages. There are still no real resolution to how nuclear waste gets stored. It's a question for the federal government that they've been chewing on for quite a long time, and the Yucca Mountain project was going to be a solution to that, but still has not been resolved. These plants do consume a large amount of water, which is typically why they are built on the coastline, because they pump through ocean water to cool the plant. And there are continuing environmental concerns, both in terms of potential contamination of the plant operating, of any of the radiation getting into the ecosystem, but also the implications of sourcing the materials and the mining that comes with mining uranium and where it's coming from throughout the world and the geopolitics of that as well. And then there are just exceptionally high costs for these types of facilities in terms of construction and maintenance. You know, plants built, but to extend the operation another 5 years, they are having to make material improvements, capital improvements to enhance the reliability of that plant going forward. And then there are the long-term decommissioning costs, which are going to be quite substantial and may scale somewhat with continued extension of the plant, but really largely they're there already. It's every last bit of concrete and steel that comes from that plant is going to have to be disposed of in a very careful manner due to the radioactive material that it may contain. That's, I believe it. Oh, and the last slide is just simply that California does have a moratorium since the 70s against constructing new nuclear. That is hinging upon the government figuring out what to do with that nuclear waste. And as I spoke to already, the federal government still doesn't have a material long-term plan for how to deal with the nuclear waste from these power plants. I think that's it.
Any questions for Jeremy before we move to Roy?
One question.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, the state said 2030. What is if there was no moratorium or end date, how long could that nuclear reactor work into the future?
That's a fair question. The legislation set it up for another 5 years. They did authorize a large amount of retrofit spend to ensure the reliability of the plant. There were some cracks in the concrete and such that are being discovered that need to be resolved. So they're making a very material investment to keep this plant going for another 5 years. And it very easily could be argued that, well, we've just invested all that money. It's not going to cost us all that much more to keep it going for another 5 years. But the politics of that question are being punted to later on to be determined. But I think that is a very live possibility that this plant does keep going longer and longer. There is a bit of a question mark still right now in that PG&E's licensing arrangements through the federal government are set to expire at the end of this year and next year. They're going through the relicensing process, but that is a multi-year process. And back in 2018, when they tried to retire the plant, they got out of the queue. So it's a little unclear if the feds are going to move quickly enough. But I think it's unlikely that the feds are going to get in the way of continuing to let this plant operate, given all the concerns that are laid out there around reliability and such.
Okay. This is fun.
How much of the extension of Diablo Canyon, just an opinion, do you believe is based upon Newsom's carbon emissions deadline of 2045? And how much could we safely say is based upon anticipated usage of AI, which lately we've heard is a real energy glutton?
So back when the conversation about extending the plant was occurring, I was not tapped into the legislative side of the conversation, but from what I heard indirectly, I did not really hear any discussion around AI and load growth in that regard. But you are right, that is very much a live conversation here and now. And maybe to Donna's question about could this get extended even further, that could very well be part of that conversation going forward, that we're seeing a forward load growth trend, and this is a substantial greenhouse gas free generating asset that the state is dependent upon. I think it was largely around environmental concerns and reliability concerns. Newsom was very, very concerned after we had a few summers of really, really tight market conditions and reliability conditions, really, really concerned about continued rolling blackouts and continuing reliability issues and the political fallout that that might bring along.
Okay. No more questions? Thank you, Jeremy. We'll wait to the end if there's public comment. Anyone?
No, we have more.
Okay.
Sorry, we have Roy now. So we're now gonna make it, we're gonna bring it down to the ground, so to speak, with Power Resources analysis of the options. Go ahead, Roy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Roy Shu, Director of Power Resources. So this nuclear allocation impacts Power Resources in two ways. One is on the power content label, one is on avoided cost. So before we get into the analysis, we need to understand why carbon-free attributes are important to Power Resources, or to PCE. If you recall, the board had postponed the 100% renewable goal to 2030. So prior to 2030, we'll need carbon-free attributes or energy to serve our EcoPlus customers. So we'll need carbon-free attributes for EcoPlus, as well as this new requirement from the CEC to cover line losses on the total power content, which I'll get into a little bit later. So nuclear generation is carbon-free. So Diablo Canyon attributes is carbon-free. It's an alternative to large hydro generation, which is also carbon-free. So they produce carbon-free attributes, meaning that there will be no emissions reported on the power content label. And that's important to us. And carbon-free attributes from large hydro are now transacting or trading at very high prices, as we sort of talked about during our budget discussions, and with limited availability. Now that's the current status, and it might change the next 4 or 5 years. So what this all means is accepting the nuclear allocation will reduce the amount of carbon-free attributes PCE currently plans to procure, and thereby lowering our procurement costs. So that's why we might potentially need the nuclear allocation for cost savings. Next slide, please.
Don't do that.
All right. So so this is a 6-year allocation, but PCE will have the option to elect annually. We can choose to take 1 year, not to take it another year based on our assessment of our portfolio needs, whether or not we need it to meet EcoPlus. For example, in 2030, we might not need it because we will be at 100% renewable based on our current plan, or we might decide we need it just to cover loss. So there's some option and flexibility in this annual election. And what's important to know is anything that we do not claim, PCE does not claim on the allocation, no other LCs, namely PG&E, cannot use our unclaimed share for their power content label for any of their communications. and they cannot sell our portion that we did not claim. In fact, the resold part also applies to us. If we elect to take any of the nuclear allocation from Diablo Canyon, we cannot resell it. We have to use it. Next slide, please. So before we get into how we impact PCL in the future, this is our most current power content label. And as you can see on the nuclear line, it's not highlighted, but it's on the right side, it says nuclear. That line item shows 0, 0, 0, 0 for all our products. And to the rightmost column is the California average, that's 9.2%. So we have no nuclear on power content label right now. So the CEC, the Energy Commission, is revamping how this power content label will look like starting in reporting year 2025. What they will do is they will add a new column to the right of our specific product contents. So we have Eco Plus, Eco 100, Green Access. So in the future, there will be a new column called Total Power Content, which is the sum of all our retail products plus losses. And then we'll in the future have to cover our losses with our resources. So that's something new that's coincidentally happening as the nuclear allocation discussion is happening as well. So two things are happening at the same time. They're impacting, both are impacting the power content label. Okay, next slide, please.
And fair to say, Roy, that it has additional procurement and budget implications for all load serving entities to cover our share of that line loss, correct?
That's correct, yes. So as you'll see on the next slide, they're proposing a 4 to 6% line loss in addition to our retail sale, which we'll have to cover. I mean, we can choose to cover it with renewable, carbon-free, or unspecified power. I mean, I think we will want to cover it with non-emitting resources. So that adds to our cost of procurement to cover these additional procurement requirements. So as I mentioned on the last slide, the CEC is creating this new power content requirement called Total Power Content. It's meant to cover loss adjusted load, meaning retail sale plus loss. And the loss is currently proposed to be 4% in-state, 6% out-of-state resources in our portfolio. And also the CEC had created this oversupply account to store any excess resources that we might have in addition to our loss adjusted load. So we have our load. If we have any resources above that, we can put it in an oversupply account that will not show up in any of the power content label products. Mandatory reporting year starting in 2025. And we have no ability to change how the PCL looks. They have this new design, and we will have no saying how that looks like. So the key concept here, sorry, one more point on the last slide, is that we might want to, there's one option that we'll present later, to use the Diablo Canyon nuclear allocation to cover just the line loss on the total power content. That's one way to show it. So next slide, let's talk about the options. So this is the scenarios, options that we looked at in terms of impact to our power content label and avoided costs. Scenario 1 is status quo, right? We don't take any nuclear allocation from Diablo Canyon. It will not show up in PCE's power content label, just like the current power content label. Nuclear line item will be 0 across our power content. But we won't get any economic value via avoided costs. We don't take any. So 0 incremental savings. So let's look at option 3 first. Let's assume we would take nuclear allocation from Diablo Canyon, and we can't take partial. We have to either take it all or not take it. So if we take it, we don't have to use everything. But scenario 3 is all in. So we'll use everything we take from the allocation. So in this scenario, the nuclear line item on the power content label will show up in our Eco Plus category and also in the total power content column, the new column that's created by CEC. So this option will create the most economic value through avoided costs, and our estimated saving is about $39 million over 6 years. Now, let's look at the middle ground option in the middle. So we can take all the Diablo Canyon allocation, but we can choose to use a portion to just cover the line loss under the new total power content column, with the remainder being placed in the oversupply account. And this way, nuclear will only show up in the new total power content, so all our retail sale products will not be impacted. This middle ground approach will realize some economic savings. That's about $29 million over 6 years. So sort of an in-between of scenario 1 and 3. So those are the 3 options, and we'll get into the next slide, please. We can take a look at, yeah, go ahead.
Well, sorry to interrupt, Jeff Phelps.
Hi, Jeff.
On the PCL, like just ballpark, what would the actual number be on the nuclear line on the total power content? Let's take scenario 3, total power and Eco Plus. What would the actual numbers be on the PCL?
Excellent.
Yeah, we'll show. We have 3 mock
PCL
on the next 3 slides. Okay, so this is status quo. So as you can already tell, this power constant label new design looks different from the one that I just showed. And so quickly, starting in 2025, there will be no emissions across the board. That's the first row here. You'll see no emissions across the board for any of our contents. And then you also see some color codings. The green means renewable and zero carbon resources, and the red indicates fossil fuel and specified power. And we don't get to choose how to color code this. This is already designed by the CEC. So the nuclear line is highlighted here. If we remain status quo, nothing will, the nuclear line item will show 0 across the board. Even the total power content, as you see on the rightmost column, that's a newly created column to include line losses, all 0. Nothing changes. It has no impact to PCL, and we realize no savings. So that's status quo. And I'll stop here to take questions on this one. Okay.
Middle ground question. Let's go.
Middle ground. All right. So this is the middle ground option, where so if you look at the nuclear row, the only column it will show up is under the total power content, because we choose to in this mock PCL to apply only to line losses. And because we don't have a lot of out-of-state resources for 2025 until SunZia comes online, this number will be very close to 4%. So 4%, to answer your question, Jeff, under scenario 2, that's what we will show ballpark under total power content. It will not show up in Eco Plus under this middle ground approach, because there will be excess nuclear. We're based on our analysis and what we know, and some forecasts of our renewable generation, load forecasts, and all that. There's a lot of analysis going in the background. There will be some excess nuclear that we get allocated, but we choose not to apply. So in some way, we're wasting some of the nuclear allocation from Diablo Canyon to avoid showing up in Eco Plus, or so the Eco Plus will still have a 0 under nuclear. So under this scenario, as I mentioned earlier, it's about $29 million saving for the 6 years. And then the average residential building saving, very, very back of the envelope calculation, about $35 over a 6-year period for an average customer. So next slide.
That's right.
So this is the all-in scenario, and you can see on the nuclear row, it will show up under the total power content to cover loss. You will also show up in Eco Plus. So the numbers will be higher than option 2, but this one realizes the most savings, about $39 million over a 6-year period, or $48 on an average residential bill savings over 6 years.
Wait, Roy, that slide says cumulative bill savings of 48. Oh, I see. That's per bill. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So those are the impacts to PCL and the associated and corresponding avoided cost savings for the three options.
A few more to wrap up. Any other questions for Roy? We're gonna wrap this really quick for you guys. So next steps, this is just the timeline. Essentially, if the board decides to take this option, we need to let the PUC and PG&E know by November. So that by January, then they're executing all of the contracts. So that's why this is being brought to you and the full board this month. This is just a quick run through of what other load serving entities and CCAs have done in the past. PCE, MCE, Sonoma, and Ava are now considering this right in this timeline this fall. This is something that we put together from feedback from the staff to just make sure that we serve up kind of like, hey, listen, on the one hand, this allocation can help us reach our goals, GHG free goals, and save significant money. And we know that our at least current priority is to, for customer affordability and expanded renewable energy content, both of which have budget implications. Lots of CCAs have taken in the first round this allocation, and there was not really very little public outcry about it or impact on opt-outs, because that was the other thing that we had been concerned about in the past. On the other hand, avoided procurement costs are estimated to be only, and this changed a bit from what was in the packet, that's why it's highlighted, 1 to 2% of the total budget. So we need to put in perspective, if we're going to make this a budget play, you got to put in perspective how much it actually is in the overall grand scheme of things.
But I just point out that we just did a whole machination of issuing bonds and for less than that.
Correct. Yeah, it's a good point. Just putting it all out.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So customer cost savings we've already talked about. Our website data, we looked at that as well in terms of, you know, how many people are actually looking at our Power Mix page. And from that, email and mailer, how many are actually engaging in the power content label? Because that's where this shows up, right? And so it's relatively minor, as you can see here, in terms of the exposure it actually gets. It's a required mailer that we must do every summer. So I put that all out there for all the reasons, just to go ahead and make your comments here. And as noted, you could choose to make a recommendation today to advance to the board, or you can just have the discussion. And then, as I said, later this week, we'll be going to our partner committee and CBS.
So I'll take questions, but I do want to just point out that whatever we discuss today, I hope gets laid out for the CAC. Because sometimes I feel like the CAC operates in its own little world of policiness and doesn't necessarily take into consideration the whole organization that we're having to. So questions, comments? Yes, comment.
Ethically, I hate Diablo Canyon. I abhor the idea of being extended because of all the inherent dangers. On the responsibility side, I think we have a responsibility. The customers are going to be paying for that power, whether we take it or not. I think we have a responsibility, even if we say the savings are not huge, we have a responsibility to the customers to give them that savings. And it should also affect, we're at this time trying to discount from PG&E. We don't know what PG&E is going to do with that. And it would make it harder for us to discount from whatever they charge. So I say we go with it. And I would do the scenario 3.
Rick and then Marty.
I don't think this is a close call. I mean, based on the information, 623 of our customers looked at the power content label. That's 2 out of every 1,000 customers.
And those are probably board members.
And it's a $10 million issue, whether we put it on the power label or we go to the middle ground where we basically hardly show it on the power label. I don't think it matters whether 2% comes from nuclear on the power label. I think $10 million matters, and we should protect our customers and reduce our costs wherever we possibly can, because that's the way we get to reduce our rates and encourage electrification. So I don't think it's a close call.
I'll repeat everything you've already said, but I also want to thank staff for making this a very transparent call.
Thank you.
And the amount of work that went in to give us all these details. I would definitely want to do this. I think it's the right thing to do, and I'll leave it at that.
Sorry, do you have a sense of option 2 and 3?
3. Thank you.
Yes, Betsy. I agree with everything that's been said with option 3. Which is a change in how from where I voted last time. I think, again, this is a really good presentation of the information. Will you remind me again what pulse polls are?
What?
Pulse polls that are being.
Oh, we did a similar presentation for our staff because we wanted to know what they thought. So we had a Zoom meeting and we did a quick poll.
Going live.
Yes, so option A, B, C. It turned out that the 58% went with all-in option, which was a little surprising. We're going to do a pulse poll, same with the CBO, because that's a Zoom meeting. And then the CAC will just be discussing it as part of their meeting. That's what that is. Thank you.
Anders, anything?
All in.
On? Yes.
It probably makes sense to go.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. What was the split on the other 2? Just curious.
Well, I'll have to do a little math. There was only one on the no, in the no column. And then I remember 58 in the all in, and then whatever the middle is.
So
40%.
Yeah. So I'm all into, the only thought I have is just to make sure that I think it does have there is a lifespan to it. And so don't want to become dependent on it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, work toward the end goal.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
All right. Does someone want to make a motion? Or we don't really need a motion. It's just this is consensus. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to agree too. I think we just spent a lot of time talking about a very small way to enhance our budget. 4 million to 5 million, 6 million. This is a much larger number. And I think as fiduciaries, we have a responsibility to, exactly as Rick said, help with lowering the cost of electricity. And when you put your plug in the plug, the same electrons are coming out regardless. So it, to me, actually seems a little kind of almost smoke and mirrors to go with 1 or 2, because you're sort of hiding what's really actually there. And I think you're not being transparent to the customer. So based on all those reasons, I would also support 3. Public comment? Anyone from public? Okay, that's also interesting too. That no one commented on this. So we'll go ahead and wrap it. And that's, I think, it. The objection. So I guess would everybody be comfortable with the staff sharing out sort of our position as a group to the CAC, who I think can be sometimes a little more philosophical and ideological than they are maybe as budget oriented as we are? That'd be great. Okay, if there's no other comment, then we just go to committee member reports or anything anyone wants to share
out. Just say at our last council meeting, I shared a little bit about PCE moving in the direction programs with concierge service. And I got a lot of feedback positive on that. People going, oh my goodness, what are the details? When can I do this? So interesting.
Great. It's coming soon.
That's what I said.
Somebody and
but they want a date.
A soft launch has already occurred with my waiting list. I believe the team is looking in December, but we will have a firm date for you by the board meeting. Okay,
great. Thank you to our staff members who came today. Appreciate all that.
Thanks you guys for being here.
Just a similar one. Along with Owen said, I've been getting a lot of positive feedback about concierge and also about the emergency water heater replacement program.
Yeah. And I will say we've been getting a lot of positive feedback about the programs that we're launching with the essentially the allocations that we've all received. The member agency rebates, grants. Really getting a lot of good feedback on that too.
Good to know.
Yeah, hitting it out of the ballpark was the exact quote that somebody said. Thank you.
We aim to please, and I do want to thank the team that's both here with us virtually and also came in today.
Yeah, thank
to
you
back us up.
And we like seeing everybody.
know.
You know, everybody's welcome. I know everybody else, but
I know, we've been talking about that. Shayna put together the mock, those scenarios, so
Good
do want
job.
to just acknowledge all of your hard work.
Thank
Shayna's doing
you.
really well, and our whole team is doing well. So thanks you guys for all of the discussion today. And we'll figure out the agenda order for September for the board meeting in a couple of weeks.
I guess what we're trying to figure out, just to be clear here, is how much discussion is going to happen around the policy 16 amendments, and should we put them at the end of the agenda and get through most of the other business, or do we feel like those will? We've discussed it a lot here, and we're all behind it, and we can get through those earlier to get it.
I have no idea.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it
talk
out.
about
So
it.
that's what we're gonna.
Yeah.
Keep a coin.
I think the theme is we need to spend the time across all of the topics, right? So we
Yeah.
never want to run out of time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, this is very helpful. Okay, hey, thank you very much.
Fantastic.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Have a nice